The sudden virality of a YouTube video by Nick Shirley has reignited a long simmering controversy in Minnesota, one that sits at the intersection of fraud enforcement, immigration politics, social media amplification, and partisan blame. Shirley's video, which shows him going door to door at daycares in the Minneapolis area while alleging widespread fraud among Somali-run childcare centers, has exploded across platforms. High-profile figures amplified it, major news outlets began scrutinizing its claims, and state and federal officials were forced back into a debate they thought had already been addressed. Yet while the video feels new, the underlying issue is anything but. Shirley's framing is confrontational and deliberately provocative. Presenting himself as a citizen investigator, he claims to be uncovering massive amounts of fraud tied to publicly funded daycare programs, particularly those operated by Somali-Americans. The visual style, cold knocks on daycare doors, tense exchanges, ominous narration, was tailor-made for virality. The response followed accordingly. Elon Musk retweeted the video to his enormous following, and Senator J.D. Vance shared it as well, lending it instant political weight. CNN and other national outlets began examining Shirley's allegations, not just because of the claims themselves, but because of the speed with which they were being absorbed into the national political bloodstream. The rapid spread of the video underscores how social media can collapse years of complex legal history into a single viral narrative. Shirley's presentation implies that fraud is being newly exposed and insufficiently addressed, but federal authorities have been prosecuting fraud cases in Minnesota for years. In fact, large-scale investigations into misuse of federal and state funds, ranging from child nutrition programs to pandemic-era relief, have been ongoing since well before Shirley uploaded his video. The Department of Justice has brought cases against dozens of defendants connected to fraud schemes in Minnesota, many of which involve individuals from the Somali-American community in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. Some of these investigations began as early as 2022 under the Biden administration, contradicting claims that federal enforcement has been asleep at the wheel. Across multiple cases, prosecutors have alleged conspiracies involving falsified documents, shell companies, kickbacks, and the misuse of public funds intended for vulnerable populations. So far, at least 80 people have been indicted and at least 56 convictions have been secured, according to public reporting and court records. These numbers matter because they complicate the simple story implied by Shirley's video. Federal law enforcement has not ignored fraud in Minnesota. It has devoted significant resources to investigating and prosecuting it. In response to the renewed attention sparked by the video, figures such as Pam Bondi and Kash Patel publicly emphasized that point, arguing that the system has been actively pursuing these cases from the beginning. Their message was clear. Viral videos may be drawing attention now, but the work of investigation and prosecution has been ongoing for years. Still, the political consequences of Shirley's video have landed most heavily at the state level, particularly on Governor Tim Walz. Minnesota Republicans argue that regardless of federal prosecutions, Walz bears ultimate responsibility for allowing fraud to flourish within state-administered programs. In their view, repeated scandals point to systemic failures in oversight, accountability, and leadership. They argue that warning signs were visible long before federal indictments were handed down, and that state agencies under Walz's watch failed to act quickly or aggressively enough. Walz rejects that characterization. He has pointed to concrete steps his administration has taken, including shutting down at least one troubled program and creating a new program integrity director role focused on preventing fraud before it occurs. Walz maintains that his administration has worked cooperatively with federal investigators and that the recent prosecutions are evidence of accountability, not neglect. From his perspective, fraud is a reality that every large public program must guard against, and the proper response is reform and enforcement, not political scapegoating. What makes this issue especially volatile is the way it intersects with identity and community. The concentration of defendants from the Somali-American community has fueled accusations of selective outrage and racialized narratives. Advocates warn that viral content, like Shirley's video, risks painting an entire immigrant community with the brush of criminality, despite the fact that the overwhelming majority of Somali-Americans are not implicated in fraud and are themselves taxpayers and program beneficiaries. They argue that aggressive, performative tactics, such as confronting daycare workers on camera, do little to advance accountability and much to inflame suspicion and hostility. At the same time, critics counter that acknowledging the risk of stigma should not prevent honest scrutiny of public spending. They argue that fraud undermines trust in social programs and ultimately harms the very communities those programs are designed to help. From this perspective, the problem is not that fraud is being discussed too loudly, but that it was ignored too long. The broader lesson may be less about Minnesota specifically and more about how modern political narratives form. A decade of investigations, audits, indictments, and court proceedings can be eclipsed overnight by a single viral video. Social media rewards clarity, drama, and moral certainty, even when reality is fragmented and slow-moving. In that environment, accountability becomes a political weapon as much as a policy goal. Minnesota's fraud controversies are real, documented, and serious. They are also complex, long-running, and already the subject of substantial law enforcement action. Shirley's video did not uncover the issue, but it did repackage it in a way that captured national attention and reignited partisan conflict. Whether that attention leads to better oversight and reform, or simply deeper polarization, remains to be seen. What is clear is that viral exposure, once unleashed, can reshape public understanding far faster than the legal system ever could.